Hello and welcome to the Life Tech Webcast on accessible gardening. My name is Jennifer Poppy and I'll be taking you through some ideas to make gardening more accessible. So there are lots of reasons why people garden and lots of reasons why it might be hard. Having a garden can bring beauty into our lives. It can get us out of the house or closer to nature, and it can be a great way for us to express our creativity and our personality. Like any hobby, gardening can give us a sense of purpose and achievement. Research has even indicated that green spaces such as gardens can help us recover from illness and generally just be happier. Having said this, if we have trouble getting to the garden, reaching the plants, or handling the tools, this can really impact on our ability to do gardening tasks and to enjoy it. So today's webcast is all about imagining possibilities to make gardening more accessible. I'll go through some common problems that people can face, how these problems can be addressed through changes in the garden style or its layout, and through the use of different pieces of technology, assistive technology. This is very much an introduction to what is possible, so I won't be naming specific pieces of equipment. If you'd like to learn more, please feel free to contact us. First, I wanted to quickly review what good and not so good gardening looks like. This diagram here is frequently used by OTs like me to explain what we do. It's called the PEO model, or Person, Environment, Occupation model. The yellow circle contains everything relating to the person, their skills, interests, expectations, past experiences, etc. The green circle refers to their environment, the garden layout, the tools and technology used to support them, other people in the person's life, expectations from others, and so on. Finally, the blue circle is what the person is doing, in this case gardening tasks, so watering plants, weeding, harvesting, and so on. The space in the middle where they all overlap is really important. It signifies how fulfilling or stressful the task is when these elements are combined. If there is a good fit between person, environment, and occupation, the person will be able to do those tasks easily and happily. If there is a poor fit, the person will struggle to do the task, and it could lead to all sorts of physical, practical, or emotional problems. With this in mind, it's important to be realistic about your abilities and expectations, your role as a gardener, and the quality and quantity of the garden itself. Gardens can be finicky things at the best of times, and a lot of their success comes from careful consideration of sunlight, water, plant nutrients, and quite a bit of luck too. Don't expect to get this right on the first or even the fifth attempt. It might also be necessary to redesign the garden, so there's less maintenance needed, for improved safety, or to make it easier to do tasks. Different tools can also help make tasks easier. It's completely okay and sometimes necessary to do less. You might look into getting help from others, especially if you have high standards from your garden. Think about what you enjoy most about gardening, whether it is picking flowers or weeding for relaxation, and find a way to keep doing this while letting others do the things you don't enjoy so much or find difficult. Another way of doing less is scaling back and having less plants or plants with less maintenance. When we are realistic, doing enough for enjoyment but not too much, and we have an environment that supports us, we can garden easily and happily. Today, we'll be mostly looking at ways to modify the environment, that is to redesign or to use tools to make gardening easier. Part of being realistic is being aware of the risks involved in gardening. Some of these include the risk of exposure to chemicals and bacteria, allergic reactions, temperature and hydration issues, the physical effort required, and the risk of injury from tools, plants, or animals. Because of these risks, some people will need to scale back or be more of a director or helper rather than a hands-on gardener. Others might be able to get away with personal protective equipment and by washing their hands very regularly. So now on to the good stuff. Let's imagine what gardening could look like when faced with some common challenges. Here are the categories we'll be looking at: mobility, reach, tool use, and endurance. We'll talk about some of the difficulties in these categories and what sorts of changes can often make things easier. So the first thing that comes to mind when I think about outdoors is mobility. How will people get around the garden? This is particularly important if a person has balance issues or uses mobility aids such as a wheelchair, a walker, or walking sticks. Pay attention to the terrain and slope of the place you plant a garden. If it's anything like this, there are bound to be big safety issues with moving about. Many wheelchairs and scooters won't even be able to climb this sort of hill, even without the rocks. It is possible for some people to walk or wheel over rough terrain, but this is risky and can potentially lead to a fall or injury. It's also really hard and uses a lot of effort. If you use equipment that isn't designed for rough terrain, you also risk really damaging that equipment. Even grass can be tricky to navigate, especially when the ground is uneven or it has rained and the ground is softer. So what is a good ground surface? I like to think about where we might be able to go while wearing a pair of roller skates. If it's difficult for an average person using roller skates, it will be difficult with a standard manual wheelchair or walker because the caster wheels can be a similar size. This photo gives a good example of a path surface that is wheel-friendly. It is nice and flat but with a bit of grip for those who walk on it, and the plants are positioned close enough that they can be watered without straying from the path. I think if it was me, I might widen that doorway a little more, but other than that, this is a great example of an accessible area. Paths don't have to be concrete either. They can be made of wood, stone, tile, or even packed dirt, so long as it doesn't get too muddy or slippery after rain. If a nice flat path is not possible, it might be necessary to upgrade your mobility equipment. Tiny walker wheels and wheelchair casters will not work here and are going to be easily damaged. The wheelchair pictured has been specifically designed for use on such ground. You can also get add-ons for standard wheelchairs to give better ground clearance. Powered wheelchairs and some larger scooters can also go on smoother grass without much trouble. The one used by the person in the picture to the left is pretty standard but sufficient to go on the grass to play with their dog. There are other wheelchairs with much larger knobby wheels and better suspension that are much better designed to go over rough terrain. The chair in the picture to the right has a tracked drive system which can go over very rough terrain with no problem. Some quad bikes and ride-on mowers can also have seating adapted to be more supportive. Again, just like in a car, it's important to keep away from very wet ground in case the tyres get bogged. So now we have sorted mobility, but what about actually reaching the plants? The ground here is smooth up to the garden bed, so it may be okay for a scooter or a power wheelchair, but it would be really hard to reach any of the plants from the edge there. Here are some reaching guidelines that should apply to most of us. For safe and easy reach, we want to avoid bending or leaning to the side, or stooping so that we've hunched our back. Aim to keep your arms somewhere below shoulder height, but at or above hip height. If you have to reach further than this, you might need a long-handled tool or reacher. Some people with extreme weakness will have trouble with this and may require a wheelchair with armrests to rest their elbow on while moving around. Finally, we are strongest when our arms are tucked close to our body, so if we're reaching out away from our body, we should only really be picking up light things. Practically, this means that we want to lower the height of things above our shoulders, raise the height of things below our waist, and use reaching aids or long-handled tools to reach further away. So starting with long-handled tools, there are many types of long-handled tools, from pruners and saws to hoes and weeders. Look for tools with a telescoping design so that they're not so difficult to carry. Because of the extra length, they can be a little unwieldy to handle, so it may take some practice to use them well. Adding an extra handle attachment can sometimes make these tools easier to grasp and to use. Also consider what functions your mobility device might have that can help improve your reach. For instance, this power wheelchair has a lift function that could be used next to plants to reach a little higher. There are also wheelchairs that can stand a person up for a similar outcome. We can also raise the height of planting beds, which are commonly very low. There are many different types of raised planter beds. The one on the left is a common and simple type of raised bed that is often used for a no-dig garden. The one on the right has a stepped design which raises the plants at the back to be slightly easier to see and to reach. This table planter is designed so that people can use it while standing, or they can roll under it with a wheelchair. There are table planters such as this with additional cutouts to get a chair really close to the plants for easy access. Other people prefer A-frame planters, which can be built to different heights and have good space around them to facilitate accessing the plants and the soil. Some plants, such as certain roses, can be grafted onto a long stem to create a standard plant like a mini tree. This can help to bring the flowers or fruit up high, where the gardener is sitting or standing, while leaving the base free and accessible for watering. Climbing plants can also be really good options if they can be trained up a trellis, since you can get up nice and close to the important parts of the plant. Consider if the plant will use the same vines, like with climbing roses, or if they die back each season and will have to be trained up the trellis again, like raspberries, since this will increase the amount of work needed, and you may need some help to secure the lowermost parts to the trellis. Espalier is a special term for when a tree is trained along a trellis so that its branches are all accessible from one flat plane. This is actually quite labour intensive, but yields some very pretty displays. And since the branches are spread, it can also make picking fruit and flowers easier since you can see and access everything from the one side. There are also vertical gardens, which like trellises and espalier, allow plants to be accessed nice and close. There are different types of vertical garden systems that can be different sizes, freestanding or wall-mounted, and for outdoor or indoor use. Some can also be integrated into an automated watering setup. And of course, lastly, when thinking about planting, there are all sorts of pots and pot stands you can use either indoors or outdoors to help raise the height of the plants and soil. Pots come in all shapes and sizes, some with a spot to store water so the plant can water itself for a period of time, and don't need much room. As you can see here, there are pots that can fit on a windowsill or a balcony ledge. If you have large pots on the ground, consider placing them on a wheeled base so you can move them as needed from where they're easily reachable to where they're more decorative or have more sunlight. You could also consider a terrarium or two. Terrariums are plantings inside a glass shell that help the plants to retain water. These are usually quite small and portable, so they can be accessed easily from a bench or desk. They tend to also do a bit better indoors rather than outdoors. So now we've spoken about reach, what about the tools that are used? We've spoken about long-handled tools for reach, but is there anything else that can be useful? When thinking about tools to make it easier, there's usually a trade-off and you have to choose between lightweight tools or powered tools. Some tools can require a lot of strength and effort to use, so a lightweight or smaller tool will be easier to carry and handle. However, they will also probably take longer to do things. They won't be very useful for thicker branches or dense clay soil, so they're best used with raised garden beds and less established plants. The hand tools shown here are nice and lightweight, and they can be found in most gardening shops. On the other hand, powered tools will be heavier, but can give that extra bit of oomph to cut through a stubborn branch or to move heavy loads. The wheelbarrow shown here has two motorised wheels that help pull the load across the ground. It still requires steering, but can really help when carrying heavy loads or crossing rough ground. Sometimes it's not the weight of the tool that's the issue, but it's that they're really tricky to hold onto. Some tools are adapted with built-up padded handles or an angled handle so they can be gripped in a different way. For longer tools especially, there are also handles that can be attached for an additional gripping point. If you're used to standard gardening tools, these extras can take some getting used to. If used correctly, however, they can really reduce pain since you're not bending your arm or wrist in strange ways to perform a task. Finally, consider where your tools will be kept and how you will get to them. If they are nice and lightweight, it might be easy to carry them with you in a tool belt or on a mobile cart, or maybe under your wheelchair. If they are larger and heavier, they will be harder to carry, so think about keeping them as close to where you need them as possible. For example, if you only use a long-handled pruner for a certain tree, keep the pruner wrapped in plastic or buried in a sand bucket right next to the tree. So now let's talk about endurance. Gardening can be a lot of work, especially when you try to do everything all at once. There are ways to reduce this workload, or even to automate tasks so they no longer need to be done. First of all, it's important to plan places where you can rest and take a break when it suits you. If you have a wheelchair or walker, then you can carry around a convenient seat with you. Others may choose a wheeled garden stool to help with this, as well as to help with bending and reaching. For those who are not carrying a seat with them, it's important to make sure there are plenty of places to sit and rest, whether it's a garden seat like here or a ledge on a raised garden bed. One way of reducing effort in gardening is by setting up a no-dig garden. A no-dig garden basically involves layering different types of organic matter on top of one another and watering them down. Over time, these layers break down to create a nutrient-rich living soil. No-dig gardens can be created in raised beds or pots with good success. Because the layers are added on top of one another, you don't need to dig down to break up any hard soil, and this means that you don't need any heavy shovels or other such tools. Instead, you can move smaller buckets full of organic layers and use lightweight cultivating tools to plant in the soft, broken down soil. Another way to reduce the work of gardening is to reduce the need to check and water plants. The first and most obvious way to do this would be to choose plants that would survive without additional watering. This is a practice known as xeriscaping. These gardens require far less time and effort to maintain, aside from the occasional weeding and mulching. You can also purchase and set up watering systems such as drip irrigation, sprinkler systems and self-watering planters to deliver water to the plants without the need for a hose or a watering can. Many of these systems can be connected to the home water supply and automated using a timer or other trigger. There are many types of irrigation systems to suit all sorts of gardening styles and environments. Finally, there are moisture meters that can be placed in the soil to check how hydrated a plant or group of plants is. With these sensors, you don't have to place your fingers in the soil to check how moist it is and can avoid the over or under watering based on guesswork. The man here has built a sub-irrigation system for his many pot plants. Water flows through the pipes and is soaked up from the bottom. A hydroponic system works in a similar way, except that plants are grown without soil and the water usually has some chemical nutrients added to it as well. Finally, it is possible to automate some gardening tasks. Automation components are made up of sensors and controllers. You can have either, but they work best together to do tasks automatically without any input from you. The simplest type of sensor is a timer. It senses the time of day or the day of the week and tells you when that is. Plant sensors are devices you place in the soil near your plant. They will gather information on surroundings such as moisture, soil pH, light, temperature and so on, and send it to your phone, tablet or computer. These sensors can be used indoors or outdoors. Weather sensors are used outdoors and measure the overall temperature, humidity, UV light and precipitation. Watering controllers replace the controller of an existing irrigation system. If you don't have an irrigation system, there will soon be a couple of hose-fed options as well. These find information from sensors or from simple timers again, and control when and where the water will be provided to your plants. If you're clever and plan ahead, you can also use data from plant and weather sensors to trigger watering once the soil moisture has dropped below a certain level. Finally, robot lawnmowers are a bit like the robot vacuum cleaners you see more and more often in the shops. Press a button or set a timer, and they can drive around your lawn and mow it for you. They use special invisible boundaries to stop them from going into the garden bed or onto the street. At the moment, these are thousands of dollars, but it is likely that as the technology matures, they will get more usable and less expensive. These can be particularly useful if you have a large area of grass that needs regular mowing, or for areas where it is difficult to navigate a normal lawnmower. So now that we've gone through some possibilities, you might want to start thinking about where you can look for information that is specific to you. We always recommend talking to a number of different people to make sure that a solution is right for you. You, of course, are the best person to know your specific skills, ideas, and motivations. Expert users are people who have been gardening themselves with similar issues. They are great sources of information on what has worked for them, what they've tried without success, and what ongoing costs and maintenance might be needed. AT services, such as LifeTech or a local therapist, can be useful to help match your skills, interests and goals with potential AT and environment adaptations. Family and friends are great to talk to help narrow down options that will work for your particular circumstances. They can give you an extra viewpoint on what might work in your space, and can also be really good support people if something isn't working right. Finally, suppliers are the experts on their own particular product ranges. If you have features in mind, they can tell you anything about their product range that might fit your bill, and they can provide detailed information on how the products work and what they would cost you. Suppliers are the people you will end up buying from, so it's also important that they can help you with setup, learning how to use the tools or devices, and maintaining them. So once you have the information you need, you then need to choose what you get and how you set things up. When starting a garden, there are a lot of things that need to be considered before even picking a plant. You really need to think about what space is available and what plants could even grow in this space. If you're short on space, you should consider using a few plants that could survive indoors, or you could join a local community garden. All plants need a certain amount of sun and water, and usually will require some shelter from wind or harsh summer sun. These can vary between winter and summer and may affect your placement and choice of plants. Of course, you will also need to think about the likely maintenance required for all of your plants and garden structures. If you will have trouble doing this, you'll need to scale back or involve someone else to help you with these tasks. Lastly, think about why you're interested in creating a garden in the first place. If you're creating a calming, relaxing space, you may design a garden very differently to someone who wants to harvest food or someone who wants to attract birds or other native wildlife. When choosing your assistive technology, whether it is a rake or a wheelchair, there are many questions that would need to be asked, and these are outside the scope of this video. 4 common questions are: what is the load capacity of the device, or how heavy duty does it need to be? Does it need to be protected from rain, wind, or large amounts of water? What kind of maintenance do I need to do to keep it working safely and well, and how often must this be done? Where will I store the item, and how will I get it out and set it up when I need it? There are many other questions as well, depending on the device. As always, feel free to ask us at LifeTech and we can try to point you in the right direction. So now we are up to the final step. We have imagined what might be possible in our garden, sought further information, and chosen the layout and products to put in place. Now is the time to think about any additional support we might need in order for our garden to really work for us. First of all, think about any skills you might need to learn or brush up on. If you have a complicated device such as an automated watering system, taking time to learn exactly how it works and how to modify it after installation may be especially useful. Good manual handling techniques are relevant for everyone, but especially for gardeners since it's really easy to stoop or overreach and cause injury. It might also be useful to learn specific gardening techniques, from beginner skills such as weeding and planting, to more specialised gardening topics such as growing citrus or companion planting. Finally, everyone needs plenty of practice before they can expect to correctly handle plants and tools. So how will you get this practice in? And who will support you? Also think about ways in which you can scale up your garden or reduce your input as your confidence, abilities, or desires change. Could you add, remove, or change the plants? Get help from someone else to do some of the harder or less enjoyable tasks. Or maybe bring your garden closer to the house, or even indoors. Finally, think about the people who will be there to support you. These people could physically help in your garden with pruning, weeding, watering, or other tasks. They could help motivate you by sharing the interest in gardening, or by reminding you to perform certain gardening tasks. They could help you to take care of your tools or to maintain the hard structures in your garden, such as fences, railings, trellises. They could also help you with personal tasks, such as putting on gardening gloves or helping you to wash your hands thoroughly after gardening. The people who could do this could be paid workers, or they could volunteer to help you as a friend or family member. When people come and support you is up to you. They may have a regular time and day that they come to, say, help weed and prune plants. Otherwise, you could ask them for help when you're unwell or away from home for a longer period. Regardless of whether the help is regular or occasional, it is useful to think in advance of who might help you before you need any help, so that the offers are there when you need it. So that is all from me about accessible gardening. I hope that this information was interesting and relevant for you. If you would like any more information or would like to discuss what might make gardening more accessible for you, please feel free to contact LifeTech on 1300 885 886 in Queensland, or by emailing us on mail@lifetech.org.au. Again, thanks for watching, and happy gardening.